In my previous video, I shared with you 3 simple daily habits you can do that will reduce your risk of dying from chronic diseases, including 4 horsemen of death: cancer, diabetes, dementia, and number 1 leading cause being cardiovascular disease. I believe it's not only important to know what to do, but also why we do it. When we know the why behind how or what, this is what allows us to build daily non-negotiable habits towards leading longer, healthier lives. I want to explain what's happening under the hood inside of your cells so that you can understand why those habits and many others we're going to be discussing actually work. You're more likely to create a lasting change that translates to years living optimally in vibrant health, both physical and cognitive. In the past video, I talked about this common misconception we have, and that is that sugar is the bad guy. Sugar is an essential molecule of life. Our brain, heart cells, muscle cells, they all need sugar in order to keep us alive and make energy. Sugar is not the bad guy. Having high sugar that drives high insulin, or the state of hyperinsulinemia, is actually the problem. More correctly, continuous exposure to insulin is what drives the metabolic disease, accelerates the cellular aging, ongoing inflammation, and lasting damage that sets you on the wrong path of chronic diseases and dying prematurely. That is what we want to prevent. So let's find out why do some of those strategies we talked about actually work. When you eat, your blood sugar starts to rise. This sends a signal to your pancreas, which is an organ that pumps out insulin, which will bring down blood sugar to safe levels. Inside of your pancreas, there are tiny little helpers called beta cells. Their job is to watch how much sugar is accumulated in your body and your bloodstream. They especially are in tune to sense how much sugar is floating in your bloodstream. Then they decide when and how much to send of that hormone that we talked about called insulin, which, as a side note, is not only a hormone that will bring your blood sugar down, but more importantly, more dangerously in certain cases, it is also a growth hormone. Sugar comes in, floods the bloodstream. Pancreas or beta cells, little helpers inside of pancreas, will sense it, and then they send out insulin. What is so special about those beta cells? Those beta cells have a meter inside, an enzyme that's called glucokinase. This enzyme will check how much blood sugar there is. If there is a lot of sugar, this gives a signal to cell to make energy. You can almost think of it as there is a lot of sugar, your cellular battery starts to charge up. This extra creation of energy flips the switch inside your cells, kind of like turning on your light switch, which then wakes up the cell and sends the electrical signal down. That signal says, sugar is high, it's time to act. What happens next is that signal opens up doors, calcium channel doors, which allows calcium to go inside of the cell, which then waves kind of like a checkered flag in Formula 1, giving a signal of go. That go signal means that cell is now ready to release insulin. So sugar rises, pancreatic cells are going to sense it, electrical signal gets stimulated that opens up the doors for calcium to send the signal to release insulin. Then insulin goes and knocks on cellular doors to unlock those doors for then sugar that's floating in the bloodstream to enter those doors, through those doors, and go inside of muscle cells, brain cells, fats and cells, and more. Where then that sugar can be either used for energy, which is usually the case in muscle cells, or be stored like in fat for future use. When your blood sugar remains high, and it's repetitively high, so meal after meal, day after day, year after year, your cells become deaf to insulin's knocking, number 1, and then number 2, your pancreas also can exhaust, where it's no longer able to pump insulin as it did before. This overall process, especially when the cells are becoming deaf to insulin's knocking, is referred to as insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is not only linked to higher risk of developing and dying from four horsemen of death, but it's also linked to other chronic diseases like non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and more. The reason that this process is so dangerous is it's because it's insidious. You can go on for months, years, sometimes even decades, having this, what I described, without really feeling it much. You don't necessarily feel that you're in pain, but what you do feel are some of those things that we account as aging. So maybe brain fog, being more tired, perhaps needing more sugary food to keep your energy up, especially crashing after meals, perhaps waking up in the morning tired, even though you slept adequate time. This process that I just described is what worries me. It's because it's so insidious. That's the dangerous part about this. You can go on for years with this happening underneath your hood, inside of your cells, but you don't feel it. And we don't use advanced testing to be able to identify those early markers of this cardiometabolic or really metabolic storm. Having normal A1C does not necessarily mean that you are metabolically healthy. I have covered this in the other video, but really briefly, A1C or hemoglobin A1C is your average blood glucose over a 3-month time period. That number, as long as it's below 6.5, 6.4, 6.5, you're considered to not have diabetes. If that number is below 5.6, 5.7, you're considered to not have prediabetes. But as we know, and as we discussed before, you can have normal A1C and have hyperinsulinemia, meaning high insulin that's causing all this damage for years, until your pancreas is no longer able to pump out enough insulin, where it's now no longer, because of that, keeping your blood sugar levels under that safe range. That's the moment when you typically are diagnosed either with prediabetes or diabetes. And although there are no major signs, there are many distress symptoms signs that your body is sending out. Brain fog, crashing after eating, craving sugar, and so on. One of the reasons why high insulin, especially repetitive and continuous high insulin for a long time period, is so dangerous is it causes damage to endothelium of your blood vessels, which then can lead to narrowing and stiffening of your blood vessels, process known as atherosclerosis. Atherosclerosis increases your risk of strokes and heart attacks and dying from them. But this effect, which really creates a domino effect, does not stop there. You see, the problem with insulin, being that it's a growth hormone, is when your insulin is high, especially continuously, your body is stuck in this protected storage mode. Let me explain. The point of insulin is really to store fat. That extra fat then builds up into visceral fat. This is a bad kind of fat that wraps around your organ, and it sends many inflammatory signals throughout your body. And what's worse is that visceral fat drains directly into your liver. For most of us who live modern day life, where we bathe in toxins and chemicals in our environment, from microplastics to processed food to electronics to home cleaning products and much, much more, the liver is already overwhelmed. Liver has this amazing capacity to make things, process things, and really act as a detox lab in addition to your kidneys. So main detox and processing lab for your body. Now, when your liver, on top of everything, gets flooded with this extra fat, this leads to fatty liver and worsening of your insulin resistance. When your body is already insulin resistant, your liver has a clear signal to store that sugar into fat. That fat then builds up inside of your liver, creating fatty liver or fatty liver disease. This is why many of us who don't drink will have elevated liver enzymes. which could be one of the indications that you have developed fatty liver disease, especially if you have high triglycerides or high triglyceride to HDL ratio, and I'll talk about this in another video. But also if you have elevated lipids, maybe elevated or slightly elevated A1C, all of this is a myriad of clinical biomarkers that are firm indication that you have developed or have been developing fatty liver disease. This is why your standard blood work doesn't tell you much of what's really happening inside of your cells in terms of your metabolic health. You see, if you are told that you have normal A1C level, but your A1C level is 5.3, and if you compare it to what it was 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and you notice steady creep up of that A1C, you are already or have already been on that road of being metabolically inflexible, meaning metabolically unhealthy. You are on the road towards developing diabetes. Because A1C below 5.6, 5.7 is considered to be non-prediabetic, meaning normal. This is why you're told that everything looks good, even though you may not feel quite 100%. This is because we're not measuring what truly matters, especially those early signs of metabolic storms. Do you know that by the time you are diagnosed with either prediabetes or diabetes, you have been in metabolically unhealthy state for at least 10 to 15 years? This means that your body has experienced accumulated damage, some of which can be reversed, some of which may not be reversed. That damage is especially difficult to assess in smaller vessels of your eyes and your kidneys. I'm amazed that our pancreas has this enormous capacity to continue to pump out that insulin meal after meal, day after day, years after years, before things become so obvious that you have developed metabolic inflexibility, that you're no longer metabolically healthy, and you're heading towards early death. This is one of the reasons that I say that your muscle is your longevity organ and you should invest in it and protect it at all costs. This is why I recommend that you flex your muscles daily by moving after you eat. And you can choose how you want to move. Do you want to go for a walk? You want to squat? You want to dance? Or maybe get creative and do some other activities, as long as you flex those muscles, especially your big muscles in your buttocks and in your legs. This becomes a life-saving line for those of us who have either insulin resistance or prediabetes or diabetes. Let's not forget, it's virtually all of us actually. 93% of Americans are estimated to be metabolically unhealthy. 40% of us in the United States have prediabetes. And this number is actually expected to rise, especially in younger folks. Flexing your muscles on a daily basis repetitiously, so as many times as you can, is probably more important than the duration itself. So flex your muscles as often as you can. That is your hack for longevity. Now I'm going to teach you something that most of us have never heard of, and yet it is one of the most fundamental principles of our human physiology and powerful metabolic mechanism that we all have. When your blood sugar rises, we know insulin rises, and it acts like a lock that unlocks cellular door so that blood sugar, so sugar from your blood, can go through the door inside of your cells. This is how it works for virtually all of our cells, unless you are a muscle cell. Muscle cells are the real VIPs. They don't need insulin to let that sugar go inside their cells. They have a completely different mechanism. So muscle cells don't rely on the door opener, insulin. They have something called GLUT4, G-L-U-T-4. The acronym stands for what it does. It transports T, glucose, G, inside of the muscle cells. That happens when you flex your muscles. Those little transporters, they get activated. They open up and the sugar rushes inside of the muscle cell. The important part about this is when sugar does that, when it goes inside of the muscle cells, it doesn't get stored as a fat. It gets used up for energy, which means muscles are your ultimate friend for keeping your blood sugar levels low, but also keeping your insulin levels steady and low. Remember, Insulin is the growth factor. Its job is to convert that sugar into the fat, including in bad visceral fat, which is then, as it grows, going to send those inflammatory signals and cause damage, especially in arteries and small blood vessels. This is important because damage to those can cause vision loss, dementia, diabetes, neuropathies, kidney disease, and more. This is important because that sort of damage is behind some of the symptoms that we experience. That is brain fog, low libido, low energy. The only thing you need to do is pick up one of those three practices of moving after you eat. Either walk, squat, dance, as long as you flex your muscles. When you flex those large muscles, especially of your legs and your buttocks, you're going to create an energetic demand, meaning your muscles are going to pull the blood sugar from the blood inside of the muscle cells, which means that sugar is not going to free float around your blood, sending the signal to pancreas to release more insulin, which will then end up storing that sugar into fat. Instead, the sugar gets pulled inside of your muscles and gets used for energy. Our goal is to reduce blood sugar spikes, meaning reduce insulin spikes, the state of hyperinsulinemia. Why? Because cumulative insulin exposure will cause premature cellular aging and decay, chronic diseases, and it will shorten the number of years that you live in good health and overall numbers of years. Two case scenarios. Scenario one, you ate and you continued sitting. In this scenario, your insulin spike is going to last about 3 hours. The second case scenario is you ate and you started flexing your muscles. Your insulin spike is going to last an hour and a half. That means that you have halved your cumulative exposure to insulin. And now if you apply that to 3 meals a day, every day, year after year, you, my friend, have just drank from the fountain of youth because you have altered your metabolic destiny. And yes, this applies even to folks like you and I who may have several family members with these conditions like insulin resistance, prediabetes, and diabetes. If you want to learn how to build your superpower of being metabolically healthy, then watch my next video where I explain how and why the frequency of movement is more important than the duration of the movement after meals, why sitting is killing you, and why measuring glycation directly linked to your health span. This is something that I typically will measure for all of my clients who are reversing their metabolic inflexibility. As always, know your cells to know yourself. Until the next video.